So here I'm just going to say FA purge, and this is going to be according to your FA purging criteria. So here we're going to just simply say purge FAs greater than 3 years. That's just the name that I'm giving it. And then the name that I'm giving it in the root data set always coincides with the subject. So in this case, this is going to be field activity because that's what I want to purge. So basically, you would do this for every high-level object, whether it's a field activity, customer contact, to-do, collections process, whatever these heavy entities are in the system, you would do this for each one. You would create a rule to select that data. This is that short listing process. So here I'm going to go over and tell the system that when I'm doing my purge, identify field activities based on the field activity table itself. I could go out now and I can look at the status of those field activities. And I can say based on status is the fact that if the field activity is not pending, or if the field activity is completed or canceled, these two statuses mean that I want to purge those field activities. Now that is just simply based on a status-based criteria. In many cases, you want to combine a status-based criteria with a date or time-based criteria. So I could do both. So in this case, I'm going to say anything that has been completed and anything that was created, say more than 3 years ago. Okay. So in this case here, I'm going to say I can make it dynamic. I can do sysdate minus 365 times 3, whatever that number comes out to be. I think it's 115, something like that, or 45. Let's just assume that. So in this case right here, I can generate my SQL now, and here you can see that I have a combined criteria that will look for any field activity that is older than 3 years ago, and the field activity is either completed or canceled. That's simple. That is my criteria. I could repeat that operation in the slide deck that Lincoln was showing with the funnel with the different circles in it. That's what that meant. This is a circle in that funnel. This is your field activity circle. These are your other circles. Now, in this particular case, I have my selection criteria. Once my selection criteria is there, and I know it seems a little bit navigation rich, but once you have your selection in place, you can now create your retention rules, because your retention rules depend on your data selection rules. I'll demonstrate that here. So I'm going to set up a retention rule, and you can set up multiple retention rules, but in this case, I'm just going to set up my FA purge. This is my FA purge. This is my retention rule for it. What it is that I'm purging again is our field activities. And here I can just give in an example here, DRM, data retention management, field activity. These are just arbitrary descriptions. You can also have it set up to automatic schedule, but I'm not going to do that. You can also say that while I'm purging this, automatically send a copy of this purged data into another environment, okay? So you can have another environment receive what you're purging from production. Now, the most important thing here, because all of that is optional, but the most important thing here, Jack, is your data selection. How do I get the data to purge for this object here? That is where you come over here and you go to data selection, and you choose your data selection rule. That is why I had to set this up at first, because these rules need a minimum of one of these to work. So in this case, I'm going to say, here's my selection rule. So now I have a selection rule. Which environment will I like for this to be purged in? In your case, you're going to choose the environment that you're going to purge from. And then, in a nutshell, that is your data retention rule. You have now configured the system to purge field activities. And then it says which field activities. Well, my data selection rules, which is here, defines which field activities. And embedded within that rule is the actual item. So if I click on this link here, I could do a quick hyperlink. If I click over this, it would take me here really quick, just to remind me what my selection criteria was. So I just did a hyperlink over just so I could say, well, what was my selection criteria? In this case right here, in this example, the rule is based on the date and the status. That's going to vary as Lincoln and I work with you on a pure discovery model. That's where it's going to vary because we're going to bring our CCNB knowledge to the table. Between Audrey and yourselves, we're going to have the dream team to drive this home, right? So, but this is an example, but this is where that functional expertise and all that stuff is going to play well together, and we're going to have a durable solution that will take care of these things and keep the database lean and agile to where it needs to be. So if I go back here to my, my data retention rule, the one that we just created, the one that we just created here, which is the field activity purge. In order to submit this rule, again, it can be scheduled, but for the purposes of demo, we're just going to come over here and we're going to submit it.
You want to give them an idea of how many records, potential records. Run the
How
query
many
first.
potential records? I can determine how many potential records by doing a sample extract using that rule. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I'm going to create a new package, and I'm just going to call it a purge staging demo. So this is my purge staging demo for today's date. This is a transactional package, but to Lincoln's point, this is just to give us an idea of how many records we're going to get before we actually submit it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to say test, and I'm going to come over here and say take snapshot, choose my source environment, I'm choosing field activity, and I'm going to choose my data selection rule for my FA purge to tell me how many might I expect for my big bang, because your big bang is going to be big, right? And everything else is going to be incremental trimming, your occasional trimming. So you'll never see a big bang again because your big bang is going to probably be like 2 million records. But then when you run it monthly, it may be 2,000 records. You see? So in this case right here, if I were to just run this, and I'm going to end up canceling the job, but if I were to run this, say on 24 threads, 10 threads, I'll just do just a quick example here to get an idea of how much data it's going to select. So now that I have submitted that job here, if you look at PuTTY, as soon as it comes back with my results here, you can see that it found 880,000 records. That's how many field activities are eligible for purging, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this job, okay? But this is how many that are eligible for purging. And we have begun extracting those field activities. But whenever you purge a field activity, it's not just that single FA record, it's a sum of all of its parts. So you see, when you think about an object consists of multiple pieces. So by purging a single field activity, I will in effect, be purging 1, 3, 4, 11, 12 records. By purging one field activity, I'm going to remove 12 records from your database. And because we do everything at the object level, we don't go in and just purge this one record right here. We purge the object to maintain the sanity of the database, the wholesomeness, I should say, of the database. So we do object purges, because you can deal more concisely with the database when you're dealing with the objects. But if you're going in trying to carve out an individual record, you're altering the meaning of that object, which has functional implications.
Okay, so I'm a CSR.
Mm-hmm.
I go into CCNB,
Yes.
and I happen to go into an account that had a field activity that was purged on it. Is
Yes.
there any acknowledgement that it was purged?
No,
Okay, it's just completely.
it's just gone. It's just removed history.
Okay.
Yeah. It's removed history. In order to do something like an acknowledgement, that's where our aggregate and persistence rules come into play. It means that when you purge something, EDMS has the ability to put something back. That something could be a characteristic or like a summary notes record. It could be like a notes or something like that. It could be a customer contact that embodies or embeds the details of what was purged. So that's the kind of stuff that Lincoln was talking about with the discovery that we'll map out with you. But in general, the system will do a very good job of purging these field activities. I'm going to show you a quick example here. So if I were to go back into, if I were to come back over here now, and I went to my FA purge, this time I'm going to submit it. Whenever you submit it, you can submit it in forecast mode. Forecast mode is what would have given me the same numbers to tell me how many it would have anticipated to purge exactly. But this right here would do an actual purge. So in this case right here, I'm going to set forecast mode to no, and I'm just going to run 24 threads. I won't let it run to completion, but I'll give you an idea. But if I were to come over into the system and using those aggregates, I can get an idea about how many records we have for the field activities. But let me see if I could go ahead and query the database itself based on another notion. So 1 second here. Let me just count my field activities as a whole. Okay. And then FA step is a more dramatic one. So let's do this one instead. So we're starting out. Here's our beginning number here. Okay. 5 million. This is field activity steps, right? If you look at the field activity itself, these are different tables that are part of the same object, which means that they will all be purged together. So in this case right here, this would be this amount right here, okay? What I'm going to do here temporarily is that I'm going to go into the system. I'm going to go to this rule, Lincoln. I'm going to restrict it. Okay, I'm going to say and row num is less than 1,000. I just want to show you. I want to make it manageable. Okay, so in this case where I've done that, I'm going to go back to my rule now for my FA purge. Let's go ahead and submit it. I'm going to run it on 24 threads. Forecast mode is no. So it's going to select, based on my restriction, it's only going to select 1,000 field activities. And now it's going. Okay. I said less than 1,000, so I didn't say less than equal. But here we have purged the, what happened here with my, why does it only say 4? Why does it say 4? I have to look at that in terms of what my restriction may have given me. But nonetheless, though, here's the total volume of data that was actually, no, here's what it is. I'm getting ahead of myself. So out of the 999 field activities that it attempted to purge because we told it that, EDMS said, no, I can only purge 419.
Mm-hmm. Look at the batch log.
Because of the flags.
Right.
I had no idea. All I know is that EDMS, here's my generic PwC rules. Purge these field activities. EDMS is saying, I will do my best, right? So EDMS successfully identified about 50% of those guys to purge. However, the others show up in your logs just as a user-friendly report that says that I attempted to purge this field activity. However, there's an FA upload staging record out there depending on it. So until you purge your FA staging upload record, you can't purge these guys, okay?
Right.
So, and then there could be multiple various reasons, like this one is not the FA upload staging. This is the start stop. This is what Oracle calls the SASP. It's the bridge between what they call the account B, because on the right side of the B, you have your account, your SAs, blah, blah, blah. On the left side, you have your premise, your service points, and your meters, and they meet in the middle. So when they first meet in the middle, when that marriage first occurs, the system usually say what field activity was used to start this service. So this field activity will not be able to purge because it is linked to the customer start profile. The others were all free to go. So many times you're going to cast your net and the system will purge. However, for the ones that EDMS has said, yes, I would do this. However, I'm not going to do it because I value your integrity of your data. And it rolls it back, and those aren't purged. So every time you cast your net, you're going to catch some fish, and you're going to purge those, but a lot are going to slip back into the pond because they have reasons to stay behind. So don't be, when you see these aren't errors, these are just notifications. I just don't like the color red. I think it should be something else, okay? So this is just a notification is to say, you know, as you can see, they're not errors. But because if they were errors, it'd be a little bit too, you know, it'd be too much. But these are just reports. So you'll be able to determine that based on whatever objects you're trying to do. If there was customer contacts, they would say the collection process. But most of these are going to be SASPs. Most of these guys, this is an FA stage up. So these are potential candidates that are still in the system that are not part of this. Now, how do you remedy that? Either you purge the FA stage up, or you go to your profile. You go to your profile, and I'm going to end it on this note. You create a profile, and this profile will look like this. I have to wait for this to load because it was caching. We advanced the server, so let's give it a minute to build the metadata. You're with me? Yeah. So, no, but this is exciting because, I mean, it works really, really well. It literally removes that data from the system. If I were to go over and run your FA step query again now, you can see that we have had a real impact on the data that was purged. Now look at your number. I mean, you know, just in that brief example, this is the physical database. We were able to successfully purge, you know, 400, 500 so FA steps as indicated in that report. Okay, so if I were to come here and do this here, let me do it this way, because I can't do math. Let's see. If I were to do this, this number here, in terms of the number of FA steps that are physically have been removed from the database, there should be some correlation there. There should be some correlation somewhere. 1585, you see? That is a precise measurement in terms of how much data was removed from that particular table. We could have counted the others as well, right? But that's how much was removed. But what we're going to do now to minimize our RI rollbacks is that we're going to come in and create a profile for our FA purge. So I'm going to say FA purge, and this is going to be my field activity, and then this is going to be field activity FA with staging. I want to pull in my staging records as well. I can't do anything about the start-stop because that is what it is. But for my staging records, I can say whenever I'm purging my field activity, go ahead and bring in this child dependency. FA upload state. What am I doing?
Yeah.
FA upload staging. I could come over here, FA upload staging, and I can include that as a dependency.
Yeah.
Okay, field activity.
Yeah, is it?
I didn't save it. It didn't save field activity upload staging.
Yeah, you have to hit save.
I didn't save last time. I don't know why. Okay, but now I've included what would have otherwise have to be a separate process. So I had two options then. Either I could set up another rule to go out and purge these upload staging records. So as they retire from the system, they would release their hold on some of these other field activities. So it's a loop process. So the ones that don't make it this time, they'll make it the next time because I'm going to revisit its dependencies, clean up its dependencies, and then now I have more short lists. It's just a continual process. It's a latch. Once the latch is removed off of A, latch B can be removed off of C, and now C can release D. You see, it's just churning. But in lieu of having to have multiple latches, you can group your latches into larger latches. So in this case, if I go back to my data retention rule, and I'll end it on here, is that if I go back to that particular retention rule, I can tell it that when I'm doing my FA purge, to not just purge this object in silo by itself is what we do by default, but rather use a profile to grab related data. You have to mention that profile. So now if I click save and I submit this job again, forecast mode, I'll turn this off. And I'm going to do my 24 threads. Okay? So now when we run this here, our referential integrity is going to be purely SASP now. You're not going to see FA upload staging because they're being captured at that time. So as you can see, it's running in the background now. So we're done. Okay? So in this particular case here, if I look at the data that I purged this time around, you can see that I now include other tables that I'm purging, because I've included them in the purge profile. So now I'm not just purging my FA tables, but I'm getting these other guys as well, because in order for me to purge my FAs, these guys have to be gone. So I brought them into the same transaction, into the same mix, if you will. But if I look at my log now, if I click on any of these violations, none of these will be upload stage. They're all going to be SASP. I can guarantee you that by just randomly clicking on any one of these. You're not going to see upload stage because they can't be in violation because they were pulled along with it. So it's almost like you got the moon and the earth and the moon, I should say. If you destroy the moon by itself, and then it's going to roll back, the earth by itself, and then it's going to roll back because the moon is tethered to it, it depends on it. But if you combine the moon and the earth together and destroy them, and then there's no tethering, right? So that's what we're talking about right there in terms of this here. We broke the tethering, combined them together as one mass, and there you go. Okay? So, and that's how it works. So that is the confidence, Jack, that we'll have when we go to the business and when we go to a broader community and say, here's what we've done with the Meridian tool. We're purging our data, and we have all assurances, every assurance, that the system is intact from an integrity perspective, that the account, that all of the financial balances still balance to the penny, and yet we purge millions of records from the system. Even in this very, very basic example here, though we're dealing with very, very small data points, we would have purged nearly 7,000 records just based on the 419 field activities that were shortlisted. It's not a whole lot of space and bytes here, but this is the number of kilobytes that would be resolved. Now, when that query comes back and we get our financial numbers, you're going to see that we're going to be purging gigabytes of data, gigabytes and gigabytes upon gigabytes, and these numbers are going to be in the millions. And the performance is excellent. The only thing about the financial purge is that I'm going to show you this here, and then we'll pick back up. If you're looking at the financial purge, they are special. So this rule is different from the other rule that I showed you because the financial purge has this other tab to where we have to put in our aggregate rules. And this is where we have this complex definition over here, but it works very, very well. This is where the system knows that it needs to put an artifact back into the system. So basically, it knows that it needs to create an FT entry in the system in order to preserve its rollups. It also knows that it needs to put an adjustment into the system in order to preserve the rollups. So it knows that it needs to put something back. So our existing ETL engine that we use for our conversion projects, we're piggybacking on this existing framework that we have in order to feed data retention. So this is a self-sufficient, a standalone, if you will, module within EDMS. But when our team built the data purge and archive, and they say, how can we build aggregate rules? And then we say, well, we do aggregates when we do conversion projects. Why not just leverage the ETL engine within EDMS to do whatever you need to do? Where keys are generated, where mapping and cross-references are sustained and validated, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very powerful, though, Jack, in terms of what we can do, okay? Now, the financial purge is your biggest bang for the buck, but yet its rule is one of the more complex ones, but we already have the code for it, so where we could just export it out of this implementation and put it into yours. But we want to structure this, and I'm not sure from you and Ben, what are your thoughts about how can we engage with you over a period of time to get this quick win, not quick win, but to get this win in place that we think will be big for your organization? How do we position ourselves?
Got you stumped there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let us know, because, I mean, we're excited because we know that this can help you guys. This will give us some relevance in terms of having just ongoing relationship and touch points with you guys. I mean, we want to be relevant. This is just part of our business model as well, but we want to be relevant and engaged at these levels because, I mean, something like this, as you can see how it's intuitive, and then some aspects of it is not, because when you look at this right here, you're like, what programming language is that? It's really not. It's just like when we set up these mapping definitions, and I'll show you an example. When we set up a mapping definition for like a bill ID or something like that, you can map these things based on literal inputs, or they can be sourced based on some of the field that's coming from another place. So you can see, like, whenever we're building our adjustment hash key, it is the concatenation of this value. Using the SAID, we could generate a key. So they're like predefined functions within these things that generates what you see over here. Is the Meridian generated code. This is a code that our ETL engine parses at runtime in order to do its magic. That's where all the voodoo is, right?
Ben, you missed that reference at lunch there, buddy.
Ben sincerely believes in voodoo, so.
Oh, okay, all right. We got to be careful then.
And then he made fun of me because of that.
He had you in mind. I see.
But now, if you can think about it though, Jack, and let us know how to kind of best. I mean, because we could certainly participate in like the go-to meetings and the site visits and stuff like that. But I've seen where having these procedures in place just significantly trim down a lot of the burdens.
There's a push and a pull here that's got me a little bit concerned. So our data guard databases are currently on site. There's been some logistics with getting them to the hot site, so they're still here.
Mm-hmm.
But when we
Stop the recording, Lincoln, just in case David says something off the record. You stopped it.